just since we have limited time, and we're going to record this. We're streaming it to the city's YouTube channel. I think some others will be watching from there. Appreciate everybody for making it. We invited a number of people, and we're trying a daytime thing here. I know the evening meetings sometimes can get more people. They have their own challenges. Everybody's working different schedules these days, it seems. So we wanted to give this a shot. Thanks for taking time out of your day if you're working. But wanted to introduce myself. Met most of you all, but Eric Lashinsky. I'm in the Planning and Zoning Department, Chief of Comprehensive Planning, and this is the first focus group for our Public Water Access Plan, the city's first ever Public Water Access Plan. Not to say we haven't planned for water access in other ways, but this is kind of a comprehensive project, and so I feel like it's been a long time coming, and I'm really thrilled to be working on it. We're going to do a little quick overview, but before that, let's do some introductions. I know many of you come to this conversation with an interest in mind, a relationship to a particular park or a creek or a community. You may have an affiliation with an organization. As we go around, please share any of that information so others can kind of know how you're approaching this discussion about public water access, and you're welcome to share anything else you'd like. But let's start by I want to introduce our plan consultant, the Volpe Center, who represented by Anthony and Holly here. Why don't you guys go ahead?
All right. Well, my name is Anthony Jones. I am a policy analyst with the U.S. Department of Transportation with the Volpe Center. I've been helping out with the initiative since last year. Well, yeah, it's about a year now. Looking forward to helping produce the plan and coming back to spend some more time in Annapolis as well. All right, Holly.
Hi, everyone. Holly Bostrom, also a policy analyst at the Volpe Center and part of the team supporting this effort. Nice to meet you all.
All right. I'm just going to go through my screen here. Jess Packler.
Hi, I'm Jess Packler. I am a resident of Eastport. I'm 4 kids. We've been in Eastport for about 23 or so years. We live over in the President's area, the President Street area. And I've been involved in sale and have lots of various water access, ways to access the water. And I've been involved in the water access in Eastport in particular for a number of years, just trying to protect and preserve what we have and hopefully find some new ones here at Wells Cove and also at Hawkins Cove, where my family spends lots of time. And I'm also the admin of the Eastport Neighborhood Forum, and I'm involved in education. My kids all go to Annapolis public schools, so involved in all of that type of thing as well.
Thank you. Mayor Meyer. You're on mute still. Let's see. Still on mute. Ellen, gotta unmute you. Uh-oh.
Hello.
Got you. Okay, we got you now.
Do I start again?
Yeah.
Ellen Moyer, past mayor, mother of the street and parks, and creator of the first waterfront water access points back in 1965. I have a long history and a variety of different water access, and eager to look at new ways that we can move forward to do even more.
I'm so glad you could be here. Vince.
Hi, everyone. I'm Vince Leggett. I'm the president and the founder of the Blacks of the Chesapeake Foundation based in Annapolis. and we have been documenting the contributions of African Americans in the maritime and seafood industry. Recently, I was involved in a project to rescue a 5-acre site that was adjacent to the former historic Cards and Sparrows Beach in Annapolis. And I've been working with the Park Service, the City of Annapolis, the Chesapeake Conservancy, and others. And so look forward to providing input into this process, particularly looking at how limited resource people can gain access to the waterways. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. Eddie, I should have introduced you right up front. You know, National Park Service is a partner of the cities on this project, and Eddie Gonzalez is here representing. Go ahead.
Thank you, Eric. Eddie Gonzalez. I'm Director of Partnerships and Grants for the Park Service's Chesapeake office. So we provide support across the Chesapeake watershed, and we're one of the partners on this assessment as well. As an office, we are very interested in supporting projects that increase access to the water, also to green spaces. But one of our interests in these conversations is knowing how we can be better positioned to support these kinds of projects more. So I'm really looking forward to hearing y'all's perspectives. Thanks, Eric.
Eddie, Brian Meyer.
Hey everyone, my name is Brian Meyer. I'm a lifelong waterman, Life Missions Connecting People to Water, 2014, co-founded Capital Sup that used to be at Sarles, now South Annapolis Yacht Center, with Kevin, who's also on the call. Also co-founder and acting president of Live Water Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that we built from Capital Sup, teaching veterans and also the kids that live in Haka how to swim and paddle. In the past 10 years, I've probably put more miles paddling in the downtown Annapolis waterways than anyone else, and currently building a company called Flow Home, deploying floating homes as short-term rentals in Maryland and up and down the East Coast.
Thanks, Brian. Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin Robertson. I'm Chief Programs Officer for Nature Sacred, formerly the TKF Foundation, which is a 25-year organization that is headquartered in Annapolis. Our mission is to support more equitable access to nature spaces across the country. We do that through the creation of what we call sacred places, which are green spaces designed for the communities that will be serving them. So we have a design model that's a community collaborative design model that we employ in communities that have little to no access to quality nature spaces. There's 16 of those sites in Annapolis and over 100 of them in our network. And we cultivate the best assets of those green spaces, the stewards, the community leaders that are working to make sure that they're well maintained and used in a network where they can collaborate, share resources, and gain funding support through Nature Sacred.
Great, thank you. Beryl?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Beryl Downs, and I'm the acting chair of the Greater Parole Community Association. And also I work with Delegate Shanika Henson. So I'm here because Eric told me to be.
Appreciate it, as always. Cindy?
Hi, everybody. I'm Cindy Zagon Chapman. I live in Eastport, and I'm pretty new to Annapolis since 2018. So I'm excited to be part of this focus group and have and hear some great ideas about water access. Thank you.
All right, appreciate it. Bill?
I am Bill Borwigan. I'm on the board of the Eastport Civic Association. I'm all about making sure that we preserve what we have and expand other water access locations. I'm all about putting up signs so people even know that there is water access in many locations where they don't know they exist. I like to see a kayak dock added at 6th Street and other locations where we can have floating kayak docks, regain water access at Wells Cove. I think there's some issues about clear titles on some of the parcels that need to be clarified, maybe with park and planning. I like that the city's partnering with the National Park Service for more funding and more resources, perhaps more staffing. Also, it's important that we maintain that we have a dedicated staff that maintains the parks, that the access points that we currently have, because right now a lot of them are covered by bushes and trees, and people don't even know that they exist. So if we don't know that these access points exist and they're not properly maintained, people aren't going to use them. I think it's a great resource for our city, for tourists, and we need to be taking better advantage of it for both tourists and for residents. Thanks.
You bet. Thank you for joining, Bill. Deirdre?
Hi there. Can you hear me? I'm Deirdre Ralph, not Molly. That's my daughter. I'm on the West Annapolis Civic Association, so in that West Annapolis neighborhood, and I had a recent meeting with Eric that got me to join this group. So we have about 4 sites in our neighborhood that are city-owned properties that can be parks or just some public access, 2 of which, or 3 even, possibly water access. So I'm hoping right now, our Karma O'Neill has a proposal for a September city council meeting to have 2 of these places designated by Rec and Parks as a park, which again gives signage and access, apparent access. People see it, people will come to it more. So anyway, I'm excited for this group, and lived in Navy housing for 10 years too. So kind of have that Navy touch. And then we moved into this neighborhood. So thanks, everyone.
Great. Glad you could join. Thank you again for that tour a few weeks ago. Let's see. Jack?
Hey, everybody. I'm sorry, I'm driving, so I'll be brief. I'm Jack Turner. I currently serve on the Annapolis Conservancy Board, who are the stewards of conservation easements within the city. I'm also on the board of directors at the Severn River Association. And I think from the perspective of both groups, I'm most interested in, compatible uses on conservation easements to encourage that public water access. And then from SRA's perspective, getting people in the Severn watershed closer to the water and education and, bringing awareness to the Severn River and everything it has to offer from a natural perspective. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Don't mind that you're driving, just be safe. Isaac?
I'm glad you don't mind if we're driving, because I am doing the same. My name's Isaac Vineyard. I'm the lead pastor of College Creek Church here in Annapolis. So obviously we have a particular concern for water access on College Creek and for the communities that surround that body of water. I also serve on the board of the brand new Clay Street Community Association, and I work alongside Burl Downs with Delegate Shanika Hinton as well. So happy to be involved in the conversation. Thanks, Eric.
You bet. Kevin?
Hey all, Kevin Haggis here, current CEO of Capital Sup and also co-founder of the Live Water Foundation with Brian Meyer, who's also on the call. Really interested to find out how we can help to increase public access. As a business here in the city for the past 9 years and giving more public access through paddleboarding and kayaking. We have 2 locations in town at the Elmore Park there off of Edgewood Road and also Quiet Waters Park, but we're really drastically not able to give any access for the public if they're looking to rent currently on Spa Creek or College Creek or Weems Creek. So mainly interested in those opportunities.
Thank you, Kevin. Glad you could be here. I think I got everybody. And I should acknowledge that Brian Callahan from the mayor's office has been very involved in this project. He's attending a funeral out of state, but would have been here otherwise. So yeah, I think I got everybody. So let me dive in. I'm going to just give a bit of background on the plan. My slides will advance. There we go. the agenda should have highlighted the discussion part at the end, because that's really not like that's kind of the main point of being here today. But we do want to go through some of the background on this project, where we are in the process, and so we're all on the same page. I don't know, when I tend to when I think about public water access in Annapolis, I tend to think about as something that has happened since we transitioned from being a kind of primarily industrial working waterfront to one where leisure and tourism are a big component of our waterfront. It's just two views of Ego Alley. The fact that we call our harbor area Ego Alley, I think, is part of that transformation. You know, and now we're starting to think about other uses for the waterfront and how to balance those uses. So it's from my perspective, it's primarily something that has evolved in the later part of the 20th century and into this century. In recent years, the two big planning efforts that led to this first, citywide public water access plan, are the fact that we are doing this major transformation of our city dock area, long time coming. It's certainly our most prominent civic space and waterfront space, but it has highlighted all of the other places, I think, inadvertently elsewhere in the city that aren't getting necessarily the same kind of treatment, and it's maybe certainly appropriate that our city dock gets this kind of investment with all the challenges from climate change and so forth. But we did another plan recently that was headed by the Maritime Task Force. It's the Maritime Task Force Strategy Plan, Strengthening Industry. And while public water access was not the primary focus of this planning effort, it became a focus because so much of our waterfront maritime zoning districts are in places where there should be better water access. And there's a lot of opportunities for partnerships with property owners and businesses in those zones. We have 4 maritime zones, and two of them are in Eastport, one's downtown, and one is on the backside of Back Creek off of Edgewood Road. And one thing that came out of this was a very specific idea for this plan that was put forward by the task force. There was a big recommendation. Wendy O'Sullivan, the Chesapeake superintendent of the National Park Service based here in Annapolis, had been representing the Park Service on that task force. And we made essentially a pitch for them to help us fund this project. And they were very interested as well. And they're the folks who brought in the Volpe Center to help us do this planning effort. So I should say that the pieces here on the slide that were developed during that Maritime Task Force process for this plan, the access mapping, the strategies for improved connectivity, standards, program and partnership opportunities, those are essentially the pieces of what the plan is today in terms of a scope. So let me have Anthony or Holly just kind of describe Volpe for a moment, and your background with water access stuff.
Happy to jump in there. So yeah, the USDOT Volpe Center is really focused on transportation innovation, and we have agreements with other federal agencies, states, and communities to bring our expertise to bear on different issues. And we do have a long history of working both on public lands access and also public water access. And so a couple of the examples here are from our work with the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area. And they have quite the multimodal effort happening along the Mississippi River, which includes a paddle share as linked to bike share, linked to public transit, so that folks can get around, explore the river, get to different destinations without a personal vehicle. And so that's an example of some work that we're really proud of doing in the region, really focused on getting communities and populations that don't necessarily have easy access to the river out there exploring and taking advantage of that really valuable resource in their community.
Thanks, Holly. Yeah, I was really thrilled to hear of this work. It's one of the few paddle share programs I've heard of in the country. So when the Park Service introduced us to the Volpe Center, it seemed like a good fit for this project. One of the immediate things we've done, it seems trivial, but just simply mapping all of the existing water access locations, most of which are owned and managed by the city of Annapolis, but we've tried to include privately managed public open space as well, like the St. Luke's nature area or St. John's College waterfront. I should say most of these, even the city-owned ones, don't really have the adequate signage today to clarify they're public. Many do, but it's just something that we've noticed right away. This kind of comprehensive mapping really was the beginning of the process, and naming conventions is a big part of this. Everybody's in certain sites seem to have different names to different people. So we've tried to get to the bottom of some of these sites. And this map can be found on the project website. It can be printed out as a PDF. Now it's partly cut off here, but this is really just a basic beginning of the process. We've tried to think broadly about water access barriers. We know we have incredible network of unique street end parks and other areas that provide a whole range of activities, even if they're not well identified. But we have just as many access barriers and things that are as innocuous as waterfront dining. Personally, I love waterfront dining. I think the city needs more of it. But we're trying to be mindful of what does unconditional public access mean, where you don't have to pay for something to use the waterfront. And I've had conversation with Watermark, and we love the water taxi system. It's certainly reliable and serves a lot of transient boaters, but the price point, isn't necessarily accessible to a lot of Annapolis residents. So we're just trying to be as open-minded as possible. Clearly we have a lot of marinas in the city. It's like, consider the lifeblood of the city, but those also limit our ability to have public water access. And then, we have existing sites that haven't gotten the investment. Like bottom right is Hawkins Cove, which has become a high-profile priority for the city. When I came into my position about 2 years ago, I'd been keeping tabs on Annapolis from outside the city, and grew up here, but I was sort of learning how the city had evolved, and I saw this headline. It's kind of I would say a tragic reason for doing this plan is that we have a culture today that, in many cases discourages access where it should be encouraging access. And we want to be extremely sensitive to that mentality, that the not in my backyard, the things that are proliferating in today's Annapolis, that this plan can try to turn the tide on. So we're also, from a comprehensive planning perspective, we're looking at social vulnerability in the city and using the CDC's matrix of criteria for that, where they have a certain set of factors in the upper right of the slide that point to what makes for a socially vulnerable community. And in many cases, these are communities that have seen, historic disinvestment. So we have an opportunity to change that as well with this plan. And that's why places like Hawkins Cove and College Creek have become priorities. And we can talk more about those later, but those are just two of the places where the city is currently doing design work on new public water access, improved public water, I should say. Schedule for this plan looks something like this. We're already behind schedule, but you can see that the FG, that's our focus group. We had hoped to do this one a couple months ago, back in June. We're doing it now in August. I think we're going to push these focus groups. We want to do a couple of bigger citywide community workshops. That's the W there. We're really trying to meet with as many stakeholders as possible, whether it's neighborhood organizations or businesses or property owners, or, we're trying to find ways to expand public water access and improve it. So it's not just the city that can provide that. A lot of times it is through partnerships, but on the left, you can see the various elements of the scope, pretty similar to what we had once talked about in the Maritime Task Force. And one of the first things we're doing after doing that mapping that I showed you, we did this needs assessment report. I sent that out. Hope some of you got a chance to just kind of browse through it. It's not necessarily easy reading, but has a lot of good charts that help to tell the story of where we are today with our water access network. It can be sobering at times, but it's really an effort just to have baseline data on what we have today and start to kind of get beyond just anecdotal experiences. I think most people here today probably already know what a lot of the problems are. A big part of this process is capturing all of that, documenting it, packaging it in a way that our elected officials and funders and partners can kind of run with and help us to improve the water access network. So the two big pieces of this: site assessment of every existing water access location, and then we've started a community opinion survey. Has about 500 responses as of today. When we did this report, I think we were working with about 350 back in late June. I just want to share a few of the outcomes of findings here, just to highlight where we're at. We're not getting enough of a diverse response right now. In the chart upper left, this is kind of a typical, I would say, from my experience so far in my role. We're trying to get more voices to participate in the survey, and we're doing things like going to community events. But really, we want representation in the survey that's reflective of the population in the city, the racial makeup, age breakdown, and other criteria. But you can see in the right, people are asked to give us essentially where they live, not exact address, but this is sort of where the concentration of responses have come from. And then, in the lower right, lower left, you can see we have a lot of people are driving to the waterfront, where we don't really have a lot of parking. So it's somewhat surprising, but it just kind of shows that we could be doing better to make it easier to get to the waterfront without a car. And these are all from the survey, the community opinion survey. Challenges to accessing waterfront parks. Again, lack of parking. It's something like that. It kind of points to other ways of getting the water, because we're really hampered in most places to provide that parking. So it's not really something we're going to spend a lot of money trying to improve, but we can do accessibility in other ways, whether it's better sidewalks, transit, bike connections, et cetera, boat connections. lower left, that light blue stands out because it's the number of people that have easy access to a waterfront park. But the majority of the people here have less than easy access. They've contributed to the survey so far. And then some of the sound bites on the right that we've gotten in the survey. We try to have a survey that it does have a lot of multiple choice questions, but then there's a lot of opportunity for free answer questions to kind of get to the real experiences that people are having. So if you haven't taken the survey, please make sure you do, and please let other folks know about it. It's on our website. The parks that people are visiting the most, not surprising that Quiet Waters is up there. But, Sandy Point gets a ton of visitors, has a huge Hispanic visitorship. I think the fact that's not registering higher probably means we're not hitting a diverse population. Barriers to access, there's no fees for city parks for the most part. I mean, Truxton has some fees for boat trailer parking, but generally I think the fees are referencing Quiet Waters and Sandy Point perhaps. But you can see we have a lot to improve on in terms of barriers to access. Kind of getting to the end here, we talk about things that people want to see. Paddle access is huge. Trees and natural areas really points to the need for shade and natural shorelines in many cases. And then just a few graphs from our water access, our site assessment. We have a lot of decent sidewalks getting to these sites, but in many cases they're impeded by utilities, or there's no, once you get to the park, there may not be a place to leave your bike, or so. I was actually surprised that we have as high a number with sidewalks, but you can see once you're inside a lot of these street end parks, we do have various ways of getting around. That's something we've been looking at. Let's see. Last slide here, I think. Okay. Yeah, so the graph on the left, it's kind of telling that most of our street and parks have a hard edge, bulkhead. We're starting to see more living shorelines and beach access, but this kind of points to, we talk about the soft shoreline. It's a way of addressing a lot of different goals, stormwater management or paddle access. So that's one thing we're trying to be mindful of. And then signs of disrepair, it's kind of all over the place. But if you look at that report, there's a ton of other criteria that we've been looking at, and we just tried to be comprehensive. Candidly, many of our street and parks didn't register on a lot of the criteria that we're looking at. It just kind of points to we're sort of designing these low maintenance sites. So there's opportunities to enhance these sites for sure. Sorry, somebody was saying something. Or not. That is the overview. Want to get into the conversation now. Sorry, it's easy to get into a lot of the details, but I'm gonna share the. We came up with some questions that we thought could help to structure the conversation. I'm going to hand it over to the Volpe Center at this point.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you, Eric, for giving that brief overview on what we have done so far. I know myself, I've been to Annapolis and I helped do the field review and set up the inventories and sites. And so I definitely have a firsthand experience and knowledge of what your parks look like. And I tell you, the stark contrast, as you can tell here on the screen for our question 2, with Ogden Cove and Fifth Street parking, kind of gives a storytelling of, you know, a well-maintained park, and then also one that's in disrepair and that can utilize, you know, some good investments and advancements for this project. And so as the focus of this group today, is to get y'all insights on particularly what do y'all want to see, what would be some good avenues and ways in order to make these investments and these parks better. And so in looking at these 2 illustrations of Ogden Cove and then Fifth Street Park, I would like to hear from each of you to get your perspectives on the areas that you live in or that you associate with or visit on a regular, about the improvements that could be made. And so whoever would like to go first, take the time and, you know, share your experience, or what do you think would best be fitting? Say like at the Fifth Street Park, which is in Eastport, you know, next to the yacht yards, which it has some disrepair. It's definitely concreted over. It could use some paddle shares or something to that nature. So think big, broad, and effective.
I would like to see some of these sites turned into places that can provide environmental outcomes as it relates to the Maryland Conservation Act of 2022, and use identified environmental justice communities as those that can access and engage with these sites, and also allowing for minority-owned businesses in the environmental restoration industry to provide all the workforce development activities was related to these redevelopment of these access water points. So that way, 2 things could happen. One, the people who have been, you know, as we say, not underrepresented, but in need of representation. And you can, instead of killing 2 birds with 1 stone, you can feed 2 birds with 1 scone, by providing an opportunity for workforce development as it relates to environmental restoration, and as well as providing key access points strictly for those that have been traditionally marginalized and redlined, and gentrification has caused them to not have access to these water points for the last many, many decades.
Randy, can you introduce yourself? I think you may have come in after we did all the intro.
Okay, I'm sorry. My name is Randy Rowell. I'm the chair of the City of Annapolis Environmental Commission. Also, I'm the director and coordinator for the Chesapeake Research Consortium's C-Stream internship program located at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center. Also, I'm a part owner of Breaking Boundaries Environmental LLC. And I'm also work for Art and Associates, which is a grant and proposal writing firm, family run.
All right.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you for that input, Randy.
Ellen Moyer.
Ella.
Yeah, can I talk?
Go for
Yes,
it.
ma'am. Go ahead.
I want to go beyond the maintenance of our existing parks. And yes, we do need to do some upgrades, but I'd like us to begin to really seriously look at the potential areas where that can provide public access in a variety of different ways, and that we zero in on those. And I do that because, you know, you're talking about Hawkins Cove. Hawkins Cove began in thought processes 15 years, maybe more than that ago. And the fact is, then it just got stalled. Let me use an example of College Creek. College Creek has at least 3 areas in its headwaters, you know, that are potential, that have been street end parks that need a serious upgrade. One I know is going through some reconstruction. But as you go down that creek, you know, the city has 20 feet of right of way at the end of St. John Street that would be suitable for canoe or kayak launching. The Naval Academy or the US has a great parcel of land on the other side of the creek that would be a super, very large park, not unlike that provides different kinds of opportunities, walking trails and picnic areas, etc. And we ought to be looking at that as and negotiating with and talking with the Navy for that particular, with regard to that particular site. HACA has a lot of property along waterfronts that are not now utilized. And so we need to look at those potential areas that offer opportunities that are not now being used and begin our talking and negotiations. Now, so that if the things become positive on any and all of these areas, we need to find ways to ensure that they don't get stalled as administration changes in the future. And so whether that's by resolution or legislation or in capital improvements, we need to ensure that we open up new areas to water access. I looked at College Creek because as you move away from Eastport and downtown and Spa Creek, the access points to the waterfront become less frequent, or they're just less. And as you move over to Weems Creek, there are fewer. However, we've got opportunities in this city for even more grand park-like opportunities in this our urban environment. And that's a focus that I would like to see happen. Maybe one way of dealing with it is to look at each one of those areas and develop small engaged committees, a committee for the Naval, a small 5-person committee for the Naval Academy property, another for Adams Park, another for HACA, etc. So that we've got people engaged in the doing and thinking through and working with and developing plans for sites that are opportunities, but not now, not now used. So that's one of my inputs for the day. Thank you for listening to me.
I definitely appreciate, you speaking up. I see that Aaron is getting ready to leave. I got your comment. Is there anything else that you want to speak on before you do?
Just that, after 25 years of placemaking efforts throughout this region, we've noted that when you increase community investment in the actual design of these sites, when you provide them an opportunity to infuse what is meaningful and sacred to them in these sites, it increases the eventual usership of them, makes them more welcoming to folks that would otherwise feel disengaged with sites. And so that's what we offer through our community healing initiatives, and we would be really excited to partner with all of you on these types of sites.
All right, that's good. I'm definitely hearing the synergies of, community investments, having grassroots organizations, design and develop these spaces, particularly those for more opportunities. And so I'm loving to hear this, particularly when it comes to paddle sharings, extra kayaks, access points, understanding the environmental outcomes for those who are not represented or lack of, and giving those that opportunity to spearhead and join in. So yeah.
I don't know if just real quickly, I want to say that I totally agree with everything that Randy and Ellen said, and also with what Aaron said. I think one thing I'd like to also focus when we talk about water access is not only the physical from the land to the water thing, and Eric and I had a little bit of conversation about this, but also being able to be on the water, right? So when you go to other waterfront communities, when you go to small towns on, say, Cape Cod or in Rhode Island, or even in other parts of the Chesapeake Bay, you'll see much larger mooring fields and areas where people can inexpensively have their boats and their and on the water. And we have a lot of shallow spaces where less expensive boats can be put on the water, right? So one of the things right now is that there's really a barrier for people to be able to get onto the water, right? So like we have a skiff in our backyard. It's really, it's just a little skiff, and it's great to go out and do a little fishing, but there isn't a lot of opportunity unless you have a big car to tow it into, a place to just leave it or put it like it's available. But we have those spaces in our creeks where we could have small mooring fields, and we could make it more accessible for people who don't have huge incomes to be able to get a boat on the water or have a small little boat that they can take out fishing. Because right now, I mean, slips anywhere in the Annapolis area are huge, are hugely expensive. It's really expensive to be a boat owner in Annapolis. And it doesn't, I mean, everybody knows, right? A boat is just a hole you throw your water money into, but it doesn't have to be that expensive. And there are plenty of other communities similar to ours that have made it more accessible for people who also, not just paddle boards and small boats, but small motorized boats and shallow draft boats to be able to get out on the water and do fishing and other things.
Okay.
Hey, this is Jack. Could I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
So again, thank you. I think everyone's ideas so far are very good, and clearly there's a lot of different stakeholders with different visions for what public water access means. I think just the perspective that I want to bring is one of compatible use. So not every idea would necessarily be appropriate or feasible for every public water access point, but evaluating the various public water access points and then determining what the most appropriate and feasible compatible uses are, I think is going to be a key factor. We wouldn't be able to do a paddle location at everywhere. We wouldn't be able to necessarily do environmental outcomes everywhere, but maybe making a master list of all of these potential uses, and then going on a case-by-case basis and figuring out what the best compatible uses are for each space. I think we would be well served to do that.
All right.
Hi, this is Cindy. I'd just like to make a comment if I could.
Yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
So I like everything that the ideas have been presented, and I agree completely with them. And I want to say thank you to Ellen for the work she's done when she was mayor for creating the parks that we have. And I really like what she said, and that particularly, and I think Jack just seconded, is the small focus groups, kind of, identify what needs to be done, make some prioritization in some small focus groups so that we don't get overwhelmed with trying to do everything at the same time. And then maybe we can make some progress on certain pieces. Living here for a short time, I would agree also with Jessica. I've come from other water front communities, just water communities in other parts of the country, and who have revitalized their water spaces that were sort of left a bit neglected. So it can be done, and it can be beautiful on certain, when you look at a neglected park and you try to improve it, it's just a great win for the whole community. So I just wanted to second really what everyone has already said. And I see some of the comments about how things are being utilized. And, I see a lot of folks fishing off of areas that could be so much better for them, made better for them to fish off of, and better access. When I look at your picture of your two parks here, I'm familiar with both of those pictures. And the park, the I guess we'd call Duck Park, or the one that looks nicely landscaped, is a beautiful park to sit in, and you can catch water taxi, and if you're lucky enough, you can get a dinghy. But even just to get the water taxi, we had done this just recently, and it was after dining on West Street, and it was 10 o'clock at night. And it was very difficult to get down to that floating pier to get the water taxi. There was no lighting. And you're talking about poor people who are over the age of 60. So I just wanted to mention, it might look like it's got some great access, but there's just some small things that can be done to make it a little better. And then the other park on the other side of, on Eastport side. Yeah, I mean, what can we do to make this accessible? I love the kayak and additionally paddle ideas, but make it accessible for people with young children or people who need a little help in moving around, you know, and aren't, you know, necessarily, you know, what would I call, like, mobile, you know, just some nice things that can be done. And most importantly, I guess, Anthony, I would say, let's be consistent with our street end parks and what we do. Consistency, when we look at access, I think could be really important. And I guess that's really all I need to say at the moment.
Yes. And so, you know, as I mentioned, I was there at Octon Cove once, and I know that the docks are pretty low and you don't have any good ramps or stairs to get down. And then also with the water taxi, it doesn't have a particular spot to go to as it is. And so just going through those inventory of each of the parks and understanding like what's happening, that needs assessment is kind of building that foundation for us to kind of list out the priorities of what's missing, what's there, so that everyone, when we do build like the ambassadors or these small groups, community organizations, that they have a place to start from, and then dream big and be like, hey, we want this route to go here, or a kayak or something to that nature. So
yeah, absolutely. And I've just observed that a lot of our street end docks are overrun with dinghies. So as you mentioned, the water taxi has a real hard time coming in, period, just to even access that space. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, and then understanding like the regulatories, we can also get the city to kind of help patrol the areas, make sure that signs are put up. This is where you can be, this is where you cannot be, as far as separating dinghies and mooring ships and stuff to the nature. But anybody else have a quick question, or can go ahead and proceed to the next topic? All right, I'm going to pass it off to Holly, and she'll ask a question and facilitate from here.
Thank you. So the next topic we wanted to get your perspective on is related to communicating about this story and need for water access in Annapolis. And so as Eric mentioned, you know, a big reason for doing this plan is to gather the insights about the water access need and opportunity, and to package them in a way that can be communicated to elected officials or funders or potential partners. And so we wanted to
we lost, I think we're losing you, Holly. Or is it just me?
Yeah, Holly, you're having some video issues. You may want to try to. I
think she got through most of it though.
yeah. And so until she jumps back on, I kind of navigate us through it. But yes, we're trying to understand particularly ways that we can package and communicate this out to the public as well, and to ensure we're trying to figure out how we should think about this. What is the story that we should tell from your perspective? As far as we're doing the surveys, we're getting publications out, as well as education materials and pamphlets to be shot out. But what do you suggest? Some thoughts and ideas, reaching out to different people. And also, I kind of want to hear your story so I can kind of put that into it as well.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, Ella.
Well, just thinking off the top of my head, when you're talking about communication, there are a variety of ways to do it. But one of the things we don't do very well is really advocate for ourselves. You could, for instance, every month through a Department of Rec and Parks, focus on one park area or one street and park area and kind of make it a feature for that month, so that you're describing what you could do down at the Annapolis Maritime Museum, where you can launch a kayak and where you can picnic at the Dick Sims Park, but you could street and park, so that you could focus on an area as a park for the month, and tell the story of that particular area. One of the things you have to remember is that the street end parks, 21 of them, I think, they're neighborhood parks. They're created as neighborhood parks. And so the neighbors in that area know about them and go down to them. But they're also accessible for anybody outside of the neighborhood or outside of that street where they were. And so telling the story of a park one by one might be an interesting new information to the public at large. At one time, we had an Annapolis magazine that was an addendum to the Rec and Parks 3 times a year, to the Rec and Parks schedule. And it featured department news on one part, and then, before you got to the schedule. Perhaps resurrecting that magazine, which was distributed to everybody in the city, would be another way of communicating what this city has to offer and what its parks in specific have to offer, particularly if it's under a Rec and Parks budget. My recollection is that it did not cost a whole bunch of new money to do this magazine. It was an informational piece attached to an already, schedule of coming events in terms of of programs at Rec and Parks. So anyway, I pass that on for reconsideration. Two different ways to deal with what we have, information on what we have.
I like that idea of highlighting each neighborhood or street and parks monthly. Recently, I'm here located in Boston, and they've done like neighborhood highlights where they shut down the streets once a month, and everybody came out to enjoy like the outdoors and the festivities that they had planned for those, locations. So there's definitely ways to do it. And it told the history of the neighborhood as well as the parks and how they started.
Right. You might take a look at one of the old Annapolis City magazines that were available for 5 years up to 20 at the end of 2009, and see how that could be an adjunct just for Rec and Parks, and leave out all the other departments that were featured in their news, but a Rec and Parks magazine. Anyway, I'll be glad.
And Anna Rundle does send emails saying just those things from their Rec and Park, and I'm getting great emails every week. That would be great if the city also did that.
I'll be glad if anybody wants to pursue it.
And one idea I had would be to have an app, Annapolis Water Access app that you could put on your phone, and just like we have one for the e-bikes now and the scooters, where you could just click on a water access location and it would tell you what you could do at that location. So the development of a water access app would I think also provide a lot of information that Ellen's talking about, but also be much more user friendly and with our current technologies. Everybody has an iPhone, so.
Hi, Vince. I like the way in Leggett with Blacks of the Chesapeake. I know in 1997, 98, I guess overall what I would say is as we look at trying to build input and engagement on non-traditional underserved communities in our capital city. I think a big part of it is having to build capacity within those committees. Over the 40 years I've been in Annapolis, I've seen a lot of in and out initiatives, but at the end of the day, the communities aren't strengthened any more than before help came. So my hope is that we build capacity. And I think one example that's been mentioned is the greater Clay Street area, where my own personal background is in urban planning and community development, and the city of Annapolis hired my firm to develop a master plan for the greater Clay Street community, where you had Bettina Nick with the Improvement Association and Kirby McKinney. Mayor Meyer was a big player back at that whole time. But the whole idea was build capacity in the community, and a master plan was laid out for upgrading College Creek Terrace and Oberry Court, upgrading College Creek, upgrading wetlands and stormwater management mitigation, but no capacity was built within the community to sustain the work that was done. And many times the people looked at College Creek as the back door. If the income level was high, it would have been the front door. So a lot of it is orientation. And we had fences along and little Ho Chi Minh trails running along the fence line. But $40,000 more income, they would have been the front door with storm screen porches and balconies and boat ramps. And so whether it's the Hacker properties or communities in general, finally in this segment, even when I look at minorities, African Americans and others downtown Annapolis, 40-year observation, 8 out of 10 of the African Americans and minorities are from out of town. They aren't local people. They tell me that they can't get a hot dog for under $10 in downtown Annapolis. And so again, when we just talk about trying to engage all communities, all stakeholders in the waterfront, they're just different tiers of readiness. And if we are serious and committed about our objectives, we have to have strategies that meet the different tiers of readiness for all of these wonderful opportunities. The end.
I definitely agree on all of those fronts. The experience, it's all about having that capacity and those that are ambassadors within those communities to continue to spearhead these projects and maintain them as well. So reaching out to the civic organizations or just a primary source in those communities will definitely continue that prosper on. And then having that buy-in in the city as well does too.
And I guess if you're taking note, my final point is even reaching out to community leaders, formal or informal, if capacity is not being built in the communities, that's not a sustainable model either. So please let the record show the finer point in your notes.
Right, definitely will.
Thank you.
For me, I would just say the most important thing for me is this taking the chance and this opportunity to change the narrative in the city of Annapolis. We all know the long-lasting tale of the haves and the have-nots, and the city of two Annapolises. And so I would just really feel, some kind of way if we didn't take this opportunity to rewrite history. And to change the narrative of what has historically been the protocol for this type of planning and this type of engagement. So I feel like to miss the mark on this would be not a good thing. So also aligning legislation to our needs and our goals. Right now, there's legislation rolling with tons of money for environmental justice communities. So there's a great opportunity to really strike gold in a sense in regards to having a blank check to do these projects and do these installations and these planning opportunities. And the last thing I would say is most important to me is that we take this opportunity to engage natural resource management professionals who have historically been left out of the discussion and left out of the procurement, left out of the bids. So for every aspect from the top to bottom, all minority vendors or bids come from minority-owned contractors and minority-owned, women-owned or minority-owned contractors to do the work that we're looking to do in these communities as it relates to the war. I think that little activity would really change the narrative of the entire scope. And then also I feel like we in this group or any other groups that are connected to the development or planning of this need to all come to a consensus and agree to that consensus, all of us, as to how things have gotten, how they have gotten to this point, and the level of disparity gaps that have come out of that. And then going forward, if we have that agreement and we have that consensus, we can all share our input as it relates to trying to alleviate some of those things from happening again.
All right. So engage. Good notes, I like this. We have about 15 more minutes to work through the last remaining questions. We have 3 more to get through, but so on question 4, it talks about equity in a sense of equitable access, ensuring that everyone has access from low income to communities, minority owned businesses, to the parks, as well as anything within the city. And so I was reading the question, the chat in the bottom, but the question is asking, we are trying to ensure that our public waterfront is accessible and welcoming as possible to all residents and visitors throughout the city, and make sure that the future investments address the key needs. And so part of this is understanding what barriers of access are existing and what they look like. In particular, what are the barriers of access from your perspective that this plan should address and see? I know that when I was in Annapolis and just reviewing the inventory, I noticed that, transit lines don't connect to certain parks, or there's a long, last mile, first mile gap in getting to and from them as well. And then just understanding the ideas and notions of, am I able to go into this neighborhood, as well as if there's particular regulations saying what time does the park end, or am I able to fish here at certain times of the day? Those ideas. But with y'all being residents and actually live in the city, we'd like to hear your perspectives on this.
I'll just say real quick, mine would be safety, sense of ownership, and breaking up long-lasting monopolies. For many years, the same companies have been involved with the water taxis downtown, Watermark and others. The same ones are benefiting economically from this level of monopolizing. So I would like to see some of those long-lasting monopolies be broken up and some new, fresh, and more diverse partnerships be made in that regard. And also, like you said, the sense of ownership in these activities is very important. And then also safety, because me walking through a water access community, a waterfront community, is going to look different than Eric walking through that same community. And so this is elephants in the room. So we have to be frank and blunt about how we go about this planning in a way that makes these waterfront access points accessible and inclusive to those who have also been marginalized from these access points, which was strategic in my view. That didn't happen by mistake, you know. We didn't go from 8 to 10, like he was saying, down in that area to not as much. That wasn't just by chance or just so happened. That was a strategic approach. So I feel like we need to be just as strategic in alleviating some of those things from happening again.
Yes, it definitely can resonate with the points that you just made, particularly on just being able to have that ownership and understanding that particular communities gained more investments in their parks, and then others have just been maintained with lack thereof. And so having a sense that in the communities that have lacked the investment in the money and the priority, that they should probably gain the more important now to provide more of that access to the water communities. And then also economic opportunities for, minority-owned businesses to gain grants and opportunities to facilitate, anything and everything on the water.
Barrier to access, if I could add to that, until COVID came along, there wasn't a whole lot of interest in parks and the environment. COVID has changed that. So now we have a more energized community of people that are interested in parks. So the barrier has been lack of real deep interest on the part of policymakers and government officials, and lack of money to pursue rec and park opportunities. So those are barriers that I hope that we can overcome as we look at developing and securing new sites, as well as improving maintenance to those existing 39 sites that need help. Dollars and cents, plain flat out, and attitude and priority and a change in government interest.
Yes.
And I agree with all of that, because I think, even in the last year or so, we've had multiple experiences where private landowners have been able to take over or influence the loss of public water access in the communities. And I think it's important to, when we consider communities as well, to make sure that, as somebody had said earlier, it's neighborhoods, right? And in some cases, it's hyper local neighborhoods, because you can say Eastport, and you can look at Eastport as a whole and say, well, there's all this water access, but really there's all this water access on one side of Eastport, and on the other side of Eastport, there's not all this water access. There's very limited, and now there's less water access. And, I think that's similar in many other areas in the community. So I think, whatever, and same thing that I was saying about, with the boats and, being able to moor a boat or find a slip that's a reasonable price, that type of thing. I think all of those things are really, really important. And I think it's important that we all recognize that people who have traditionally had the water access and had a private experience for that water access might not be as interested in public water access or in making those changes. And I think, the city administration, the city, everything needs to decide what their focus or what their opinion is going to be on that, right? Because it's going to, in some cases, it's going to come down, but nobody's ever been here before, so I don't want them here now. I don't want the people the public walking past my house or launching their dinghy past my house, and and the city is going to have to decide, what values they're going to support in that discussion, and it's going to be an important one.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Wills Cove is a perfect example of a barrier of neighborhood attempts to privatize.
Yes.
Bill? All right. Let's see. If there's not any more discussion on this question 4, we'll go ahead and meander our way on to 5.
Yeah. Getting there.
Yeah.
All right. This might be the last one, just given the time, but.
So question 5 is asking, is there a place you have been or visited beyond Annapolis, other cities such as Martha's Vineyard, Chicago, San Francisco, Seattle, that are doing great and interesting things with accessible waterfront trails that you would like to see placed within Annapolis itself? So open up the floor. Go ahead, Randy.
Anacostia is doing some amazing things, and I want to shout out my mentor, Dr. Sakubi Wilson, UMD, and what they're doing out there in regards to, advocacy and working in Buzzer Point, things like that. But they're doing some amazing things as it relates to kind of the points I just raised earlier about working with these communities that are considered EJ communities and that are in need of representation versus underrepresented, because the word under has a kind of negative connotation. So we try to use words of power. And the language is very important, the literacy as it relates to environmental literacy and things like that. So I think Arlington County, which doesn't have a lot of water access, but what Arlington County is doing, Arlington City is doing is considerably hallmark. And that's why they've been recognized as the Copenhagen of America. And I know Copenhagen, Denmark is considered to be one of the most sustainable places in the world. So I think that cities that are doing, cities and areas that are doing great at this are those that are allowing for 2 things to take place: sustainable design, sustainable development that gives wealth resource powers to communities in need of support and representation.
All right.
I have some suggestions.
Somebody go ahead if you hadn't spoken.
My name is Kevin, also CEO of Capital Sub here, but in the state of Delaware, there's a lot of private-public partnerships that exist that really make these public parks that are ran by the state an amenity with a private partnership with a business that's in it, that bring water access to communities that might not know how to do these access points, but also just gives some financial investment from the private company where they're giving a revenue share back to the public park or to the public city that manages that site.
This is Vince. I know with me, in addition to my planning background, I worked at DNR, Department of Natural Resources, for 10 years as well. And I know we just got on this living shoreline craze with, that was the soup of the day, the dish of the day. Everybody was in the living shorelines, dollars were in this living shoreline. But for many of the communities that I represent, living shorelines became barriers to access to the waterfront. And I've seen innovative designs around the country where people are integrating and including boardwalks and ramps and landings and views and observation stations, even on the living shoreline concept that doesn't become a living wall. So it's not just a living shoreline, it's a wall to the view shed, it's a wall to access. And I just hope the smart people on this call and your networks can find ways to do what living shorelines do, but not let them become a barrier to the water or view to the water.
Yeah. So
if you look if you look at
Am I-
small, yeah, if you look at smaller towns like Charleston and Savannah, and then areas south of Paris Island and South Carolina, they all have their water-rich areas, and they all have interesting small and larger parcels, park-like for water access.
Yeah.
You said Charleston, and where else did you say?
Savannah,
Yeah.
and then in South Carolina, south of Paris Island. I can't think of the name of the town, but as you go down towards Fripp's Island,
Buford.
and the current president is now, they're just water-rich communities, and they use every opportunity to make places amenable, including small areas where local musicians can play in the summertime or year round, depending on their climate. But there's just some really neat things that other places have done that we could take lessons from, learn lessons from.
Yeah, I really like the idea of more water promenades where you can walk along boardwalks, where you can walk. I mean, you should be able to walk from Spa Creek Bridge all the way up to Eastport Yacht Club, in my opinion, but you can't do that. We were promised a promenade at SAYC that hasn't come to fruition. The city has really backpedaled on the promises that the developer made in that location. But I mean, to be able to walk along the water and maybe have private public partnerships with and have extend boardwalks over the water in front of private businesses would be really an opportunity for people to be able to walk along the water.
Yeah, and I know in my experience, just as living in different cities, Lady Bird Lake in Austin, Texas, kind of does that. It's a trail that runs along the river, and has promenades, as well as local vendors and shops that are able to sell, their goods and water kayaks and boat launches, and everyone can access the water. But those are good things to have and connections. But definitely enjoying these other areas and locations that we'll be able to look into. Deidre, I see that you put the city of Pittsburgh, as well as Greenberry Point, for some other interesting places that are doing some good things. She says that.
I thanks for noticing those. Just city of Pittsburgh is certainly a city that, their rivers were dirty for so long, not used by boaters. They have crew teams now on their rivers, and they're just slowly finding little places where they can have bike trails and then connect it by road and then come back onto the water. They're just trying to make it contiguous. And of course, the Greenberry Point's in the paper constantly. It's just a place that, with some conversations, won't be lost. Most people don't feel probably a golf course is needed, but if it has to be with the Navy, they just have to still have some of that waterfront property, just because it would be nice. Nice is the only way you can approach it, I guess. They don't have to do it, but it would be nice.
Anthony?
Yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
Hi. I lived in Green Bay, Wisconsin for quite a number of years when they were revitalizing their downtown. And part of that revitalization is Fox River that runs really through the main part of the city. And a lot of that revitalization was water access, general water access for the public, which didn't exist before they finished. And they just did a phenomenal job. So it's just another idea for a place to research as to what they did.
Okay.
Can you say that place again?
Green Bay?
Green Bay, Wisconsin.
And if it was off the Fox River, so yeah.
Correct, yeah. And in conjunction, they connected downtown Green Bay. They're doing water access, but they also connected downtown Green Bay with to other local communities with a 30-mile bike trail down the river, which I know is not possible here, but it's just a suggestion for getting ideas on what other communities have done.
All right. We are at 12:34. And I definitely appreciate y'all giving y'all insights on all the questions that we asked. And I guess I'll turn it over to Eric to kind of close it out. But thank you for being here and talking with us. And Eric.
Sure. I appreciate, echo what Anthony said. We appreciate all the effort to be here and participate and share insights and be honest. And I think I will aim to provide less overview next time so we can have more conversation. We've tried to capture your words authentically, and we've recorded this conversation. We're going to make it available to people who want to hear what was said. We have chat that we can save as a transcript as well. I know there was a lot of things said there that are written there that we didn't capture on the whiteboards here, but I'm not gonna say it's the beginning of our process. We've already been working on this plan, but I'd say we're about a third of the way through. We're going to do more focus groups. I'm going to be reaching out to many of you and try to bring in some other voices as well to participate. And I'm just excited to capture all these recommendations in the eventual plan. So thank you again, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have other thoughts that you wanted to say on this focus group but didn't have a chance. So
all right. I think Eddie put a comment into the chat that would be really good for him to talk about just a little bit.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight to everybody, there were a lot of great ideas that came out of this that I did want to mention to everybody. Our office will be coming out with a grant program in early fall to address these kinds of ideas at the community level. So I'll make sure that you all get a notice. I'll work with Eric to make sure that you all are aware when the request for proposals becomes available, to see if we can follow up on any of these ideas through a grant.
Thank you, Eddie. Yeah, National Park Service has been a great partner here in Annapolis. They're really investing in a number of different initiatives. So, Eddie's a very accessible guy. So you can find him at the National Park Service's Chesapeake office here in Annapolis. All right. Looks like, Jess, you may want to follow up with Eddie directly with your question. So anyhow, thank you again. That concludes our first focus group, and have a good rest of your day and weekend. All right.
All right. Thank you all.